It's almost half of the population that live in apartments that don't have access to curbside recycling.
The city takes action on a decades-old debate. Plus, making Iowa City a more walkable community. I go one-on-one with International City Planner Jeff Speck. And a labor of love.
100 years from now, it'll still be here.
After restoring this historic home, the owner takes steps to preserve the past. The City of Iowa City is moving forward with 4 major changes to its recycling code. They'll all have their own level of impact, but together they should help prevent 3,000 tons of recyclable materials from making its way to our landfill. Let's begin with the one expected to have the most impact, the multifamily recycling mandate.
So right now about 45% of Iowa City residents don't have access to recycling because they live in apartments, which translates to a huge amount of material going into the landfill that we could be recycling.
With nearly half of Iowa City's population living in apartments or condominiums, there's been decades of discussion about requiring recycling for those units.
We've been skirting around the apartment recycling conversation for decades.
In 2012, the city's recycling program took the conversation to the next level by securing funds for a pilot program.
We worked with 5 different apartments to look at cost, availability of recycling, types of containers, pretty much everything we could think of that could help make a case for apartment recycling.
Over the course of the next year, Jordan and her team documented data and feedback in order to better understand how the changes would affect management of apartments.
We've had lots of great conversations with landlords about what their concerns are and how we'll be able to address some of those. So this code change will hopefully be able to tie in everything that everybody wants as far as recycling and not be too burdensome on the apartment owners.
The idea is to integrate the mandate over the course of the next 2 years by requiring management to implement the changes in order to renew a permit.
The requirement for recycling is going to be tied to rental permits. So those roll over every 2 years. So apartments will essentially have time to kind of work that in, and they'll just have to have it before their next permit renewal.
Recycling services will be made available through private haulers.
Most will probably have a dumpster in their alley or outside of their apartment, just like they do for trash. So it's going to be really similar to that setup.
This change promises to make a big impact.
We're looking at this diverting around 1,700 tons a year.
Another major change being implemented will allow food refuse to be included with yard waste collection. Both are already being used at the city's landfill to make a rich compost, which is then sold back for use in gardens and yards. To this point, though, the majority of food waste has come from the University of Iowa and a few restaurants and grocery stores that partner with the landfill. Now, residents who purchase an annual yard waste sticker for $25 will be able to mix in food waste for curbside collection.
These trucks are already running up and down the street, picking up material that's coming to the exact same facility in the exact same pile, literally. So this is just common sense to add more material to that same route and offer another service to the community.
The landfill participated in a study a few years back to determine how much recyclable material was being thrown out each year. It came as no surprise to Jordan when the results listed food waste as the #1 culprit. More than 17,000 tons of food finds its way out here each year. To put that into perspective, the amount of food waste that Iowa City throws out annually weighs more than the Brooklyn Bridge, which comes in at just under 15,000 tons. Jordan says they are guessing that in its first year, the program could reduce that amount by 1,000 tons, hoping that number will grow with time. For now, residents need to provide their own container for the yard and food waste. But as the program evolves, the council may consider using city carts similar to those used for trash. The next code change is more about keeping hazardous substances out of the landfill. For many years, people have been able to properly recycle their electronics at the landfill or the Eastside Recycling Center. However, there has never been a ban put in place to keep items like TVs and computer monitors from being thrown out at the landfill. This update will help keep these toxic items out of the environment and encourage more people to recycle them. It only costs $10 for small items and $15 for anything with a screen 18 inches or larger measured diagonally.
They're all different shapes, all different sizes. I mean, we get a lot of still old console TVs that weigh a lot, and there's not really a uniform way to recycle those except for a person by hand.
Along with containing the hazardous materials, the ban is also going to keep an estimated 350 tons of waste out of the landfill. Lastly is a secured load policy, which should result in saving taxpayer dollars. This one is common sense, and Jordan says many of their customers are already doing this. It's a simple requirement for all vehicles to cover their loads of trash or secure any bulky items that are being transported for disposal. This can be done with tarps and straps, anything that keeps litter from blowing out. This should reduce the amount of time and money the city is spending cleaning up debris.
$35,000 a year basically on litter control and cleanup, and a lot of that stuff that could have been prevented. So we're really looking at this as a cost-saving measurement for the landfill and for the community. So a secured load policy will help reduce some of that litter.
An additional fee will be applied to any load that shows up to the landfill with an unsecure load. Would you like to learn even more about the new recycling efforts? The City of Iowa City has a breakdown of all 4 changes on its website. Just head to icgov.org/waste proposals. Iowa City enjoys a rich history. It was once the state's capital and is home to the oldest university in Iowa. I recently got the chance to meet with a man who is working to preserve another piece of history in our city, the place he calls home.
Other people may have different ideas about buildings, but I think you have to appreciate them and respect them.
Dr. Donald Black is not your typical homeowner.
I've been studying design and architecture my whole life.
He knows everything about his home.
The gutters and the collection ducts were salvaged from the Children's Hospital. What I would call a hidden door. This is a closet.
And for good reason. The house that sits at 715 West Park Road was built nearly 100 years ago. Completed in 1917, the home was commissioned by Dr. Albert Byfield, the founding department chair of the pediatrics department at the University of Iowa College of Medicine.
I figured this was Dr. Byfield's study.
Black first recognized the beauty of the home when he moved to Iowa City in 1982, locating here for residency training in psychiatry at the university. But it wasn't until 2003 that Black purchased the home with his partner, John Chatema. Run down from neglect, the two decided to take on the challenge of restoring it to its original beauty.
So we had to completely renovate the house, but we wanted to make sure that what we did was compatible with the architecture.
After putting in a full year of restoration work before moving in, the two decided that just enjoying the finished product wasn't enough.
But we also wanted to have this house recognized for what it is. And that's a great house, great architecture, and so many years ago we thought of having it listed on the National Register.
There are 2 major factors considered when applying to be added to the National Register of Historic Places: the history and the architecture.
There are no other houses like this we know of in Iowa.
The home is English arts and crafts, which is quite rare according to Alicia Trimble of the Iowa City Friends of Historic Preservation. From the lack of symmetry to the clay tile roof, every unique detail was noted as part of the application process.
The windows are leaded, so where we might have muttons or those strips between windows that where individual panes of glass sit, instead of having wood muttons, this house actually has leaded glass, which is not something you see in the United States, and I've never seen it in the Midwest.
The nomination is being reviewed by the State Historical Preservation Office. The final decision will then be made by the National Park Service. Sadly, John will never get to see the home listed on the National Register. He died unexpectedly in his sleep in 2014. Perhaps spurred by the tragic loss, Dr. Black's motivation to have their home listed grew even stronger.
That will be the icing on the cake for the work that we did with this house, to have it recognized.
His biggest fear is that the large lot and its proximity to the university would catch the eye of someone who sees this space as an opportunity to cash in.
I could imagine a developer saying, geez, I could tear down that house and put up 6 townhouses in a row and call it Byfield Acres and make a lot of money. But I think that would be a tragedy. And so hopefully that sort of action can be bypassed, and listing it on the register may help.
As for Trimble, She sees it as a responsibility to preserve a handcrafted work of art.
If we tear a house down or gut a house like this, we throw all of that into the landfill, and all of that energy is wasted. There's no way to get products like this anymore, and there's no way to get the embodied energy back from building the house.
That level of respect for the home is exactly why Dr. Black sees the Byfield house as something bigger than himself, worth maintaining its integrity for a greater cause.
I'm not going to be living here forever, and there are going to be future owners, and I would hope that it would alert the owners to the fact that they have a special property and they need to conserve it. They are just occupants of that property temporarily.
Iowa City prides itself on being a pedestrian-friendly community, but would it be considered a walkable city? Joining me is Jeff Speck, international author and advocate for a walkable city. Jeff, thanks for joining me during your stop here in Iowa City.
My pleasure.
Can you tell me a little bit about the idea of a walkable city and expand on what that means for you?
Well, you know, in America, most people end up buying cars and driving them, at least for some portion of their lives. And most of our cities in America that are walkable cities still have a lot of people driving. But the question is really, is the drive necessary? Is the automobile this instrument of freedom that makes your life better, or is it a necessary prosthetic device that you need to live your life? A walkable city is a city in which the car is not something you need every day for all of your activities.
And you talk a little bit about in your book that having a walkable city can solve a whole host of problems that we have as a society. Can you identify some of those problems that we have?
The most interesting experiences of being a planner in the U.S., a city planner, is to have been advocating for walkable cities for some time and seeing a certain amount of interest in the general public, but then witnessing over the past about 15 years 3 other groups who people really listen to who are advocating for walkable cities for their own reasons, which are much more convincing. Those groups are the environmentalists, the epidemiologists, and the economists. The environmentalists talk very much about how with climate change, actually, contrary to how we used to think about cities as bad for the environment, that if you want to have the lightest possible carbon footprint, you should live in a city. The denser the better, and of course the more walkable the better, because the way that each of us contributes the most to our carbon footprint principally is through driving. Epidemiologists, of course, talk about this American obesity epidemic, all of the other illnesses and costs like diabetes that arise from that. And then finally, the economists make it very clear, between 1970 and 2010, we doubled the number of roads in America, and we've basically gone from spending 1/10 of our income on transportation to spending 2/10 of our income on transportation. So because we've burdened ourselves with this obligation of driving everywhere, we've actually made it very expensive for us to get anywhere, and working class Americans and poor Americans are tremendously burdened by the cost of driving.
The most basic definition, down to its bare bones, of a walkable city would be sidewalks. Obviously, there's more to it than that.
Sidewalks matter, but I like to say, there's no quick definition of how to make a place walkable, but for a place to be walkable, the walk has to be useful, safe, comfortable, and interesting if you're going to get people to make the choice to walk. The useful walk has to do with having a nice, robust mix of uses and hopefully a balance of uses. It also has to do with effective transit. And I know that Iowa City has one of the most effective, for a city of its size, maybe the most effective transit system. I just heard there were 7 million transit trips taken last year, which is astounding. The safe walk has to do with what I spend most of my time on, and a lot of folks in your city are currently working on, which is re-engineering your streets just to feel like you have a fighting chance against being hit by a car. More bike lanes, more parallel parking, narrower lanes, and if you have too many lanes, more than the traffic demands, you can turn driving lanes into bike lanes and other things. And then the comfortable and interesting walk have to do with what's lining the street. Even if a place is useful and safe to walk around, if it's just boring blank walls or parking structures, no one's going to choose to walk. So if you do all 4 of those things at once, you get a walkable community.
When you gave us a couple examples, but during your tour, is there anything else you noticed that Iowa City's doing really well, and what areas can we improve on?
Well, it was a bit frustrating as a lecturer to come and to hear that a lot of the advice I was going to be giving tonight is already happening. So, for example, you have a number of one-way pairs that have already been converted to two-way streets. We know two-way streets are safer than one-ways and more pleasant to walk on than one-ways. So that's an important trend that's continuing. There's the what we call the classic American road diet, where a 4-lane street becomes a 3-lane street, which gives you room for bike lanes, typically, in place of that extra lane of driving. The amazing thing about these conversions, which you've already done one and you're doing more, is that the street handles no less traffic after. I visit a lot of cities, and you're well ahead of the average, I would say, but also you're starting with good bones here. You have nice small blocks. I would say you look at some things out of the city center. Like I was directed to this new street, or this newly widened street called Sycamore Street, that reaches south to a elementary school, and I think it's got 3 15-foot wide lanes, which is 5 feet too wide, and of course it has no street trees, which are really important for the comfort of the sidewalk. And so I think your standards could be better in terms of your suburban growth, for sure.
Would you like to learn more about Speck's ideas? You're in luck. City Channel 4 recorded his entire presentation during his stop in Iowa City. You can find it by searching Jeff Speck on our website, which is citychannel4.com/video.
The Crisis Center Food Bank is currently serving over 1,000 families a week.
There is a constant need for the food bank at the Crisis Center of Johnson County. But this time of year, that demand grows.
During the holidays, there are so many other expenses that build up, and being able to provide a meal for a family is really important to us, and it's been really important to the community.
That's why the food bank began a new tradition 29 years ago.
Project Holiday was started decades ago as an opportunity to provide a special above and beyond service for people who really can't afford to celebrate the holidays otherwise.
During the month of November, residents in Johnson County can sign up for a free, customized holiday meal that will be distributed the week before Christmas. Because they expect to serve around 1,800 families, it makes more sense for the Crisis Center to buy the meals in bulk rather than take the traditional food donations. That means they need monetary donations to buy the supplies.
And just $25 will support a whole family in having a holiday meal this year.
There are a few different ways to donate. You can give in person at the Crisis Center or contribute on their website. You will also begin seeing tag sites at businesses around Iowa City. That's the third option.
The community has always come through for us, so we have no doubt that that'll happen again this year.
Organizers say just one contribution speaks volumes, because you are helping a family create memories.
The kitchen is a really important place, and the dinner table is a really important place to begin those family traditions and bring families together. So this is more than just feeding people. This is about bringing families together.
Next time on Iowa City in Focus, where should you park? How soon do you need to shovel? We'll break down what's expected when it comes to winter weather. And let us know what topics you would like to see covered in future shows. Email us at info.citychannel4.com or reach us on Facebook by liking the City of Iowa City government page. That's it for this month's episode. We'll see you next time on Iowa City in Focus.